Hello and welcome to Pardon My Disruption. I'm Alan Berkson. I'm the Director of Community Outreach for Fresh Desk, and I'm joined as always by Dr. Disruptive, Jonathan Yarmis. Welcome, Doctor.
Happy New Year, Alan.
Happy New Year to you as well.
Shana Tova.
We are broadcasting live from the Stanford Innovation Center in beautiful downtown Stamford, Connecticut.
Yep, it's not yet white.
It's not yet white. We are here the second Friday of every month, but
Don't
you're probably
reset your clocks.
You're probably thinking this is not the second Friday of the month.
Nor the third Friday.
Nor the third Friday. But normally we're here the second, so our next show will be February 12th.
Yeah, the second Friday you were in India.
Well, I was supposed to be in India, but I didn't go.
Yes, and the third Friday I was in England.
World travelers. We have to do like a remote.
Yes.
I think we have to do one from some other country.
Yes. Or some other venue. I mean, it's beautiful here in the Innovation Center. And those of you who don't know, the Stanford Innovation Center is actually the old town hall of Stamford, Connecticut. And we are in what was the courtroom in the town hall. And you can't really see the mural behind us, but it's this wonderful kind of works era.
We have to get a gavel.
Yes, we say that every time.
Every time.
And
I'm making a note.
That'll be my new year.
Gavel. Of course, I never look at these notes after the show anyway.
Or Amazon, one-click purchasing, I can probably buy one.
And have it delivered before the end of the show.
Yeah, drones in through the window. Yeah.
Somebody watch that window.
Yeah.
So we're expecting some white stuff here in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast.
Yes. Considerable.
Snowpocalypse 2016. And this is one of the most baffling things about technology, that we can have a drone deliver, probably get it within an hour, but we can't predict the weather.
Well, it's an interesting big data statement, because while we can't predict the weather, it was probably a week ago now when they first started talking about the potential for this storm, when it was nothing more than a tropical depression in the Pacific. And they said it has potential to be a massive storm, headquartered, in the Northeast, in the Mid-Atlantic region. So with some reasonable degree of precision, they identified the most likely scenarios. Now, the fun thing about weather, and it's a kind of a big data observation, one of the common observations about the weather.
But just before you get into that,
okay.
People say big data when they're talking about like their customer data or transactions. Like, no, that's not big data.
Yeah, that's compared to this.
That's little data.
Yeah, infinitesimal data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is big data.
Yeah, and big data, it's one of the challenges weather forecasters, and I don't hang out with them very often, but they've been known to talk about the challenge of weather forecasting is a mosquito farts in the Amazon, and that little wind current sets in motion something that causes this to move, that to move, and the next thing you know, you have a blizzard in the Northeast. And until they can model, the gastric, passing of individual mosquitoes in the Amazon, that they'll never be able to have the level of precision that they need. So on the one hand, it's an incredible problem. On the other hand, this is one where I'm actually surprised how accurate, given they were first talking about this when it was a week ago in the Pacific. So it had to go 1,000 miles across the Pacific, 2,500 miles across the country. And they said, they've got multiple models, and the models kept converging, and the closer in they got, the more specific they've gotten. Now, we'll see what happens. I remember, was it last winter where half of Connecticut shut down because there was supposed to be this terrible storm, and they relied on the forecast, and I think we got about 1.5 inches of snow. And it was like, really? You shut down the state over that? That'll get me on another rant talking about lawyers, because those are the people who made the decision.
But there's a forecast that says 6 to 12 inches.
Yes.
That's a big difference between 6 inches and 12 inches of snow.
I'm glad you added of snow. Yeah, NSFW broadcasting.
That's
here
right.
on
This is for kids. Yeah, this show is safe for kids. So we'll see. I guess we'll report next show whether it was 6 or 12.
Yes, and presumably if you're interested, there's this thing called the internet. You can find out before next show.
The internet.
Yes, wonderful thing.
Google that.
Yeah.
All right, so
the Google.
So last month we talked about what the year that passed. It's 2016. Let's look at the year ahead. There's some interesting trends. I think it's always worth talking about disruption and what it is versus what it isn't, and then talking about disruptors.
Yes.
I think it's worthwhile redefining disruption every once in a while for people who think that innovation is disruption.
Right, and you know, it's you rightly bring out it's not, because you know, a new feature, you add a function in Excel and it's a disruptor. No, for my world, the term, and I'm glad I coined or was given the name Dr. Disruptive in 2007. So I've got some prior art that says, yeah, I was actually using this word way before, label makers slapped it on every product. Now, including disruption. Now, right. With more disruption.
Caffeine-free with disruption.
Yes. Yeah. But disruption, what's so interesting about it is disruption is something that challenges the status quo vendors. The people who have a vested interest in maintaining existing ways of business. Disruption has a way of turning their historical strengths into things that can be leveraged against them. So why was cloud computing so disruptive? It's because there are a whole bunch of people, IBM, who just reported its 15th quarter in a row of declining revenue, who made a lot of money selling big iron to people, and all of a sudden, I didn't need to buy infrastructure. I can lease it and match it much more closely to my requirements. So before, we talk about how many MIPS were deployed in the world, and some massive percentage of them, 90% or more MIPS, millions of instructions per second, a measure of computing power. Some 90% of them or more were typically unused. They were sitting there because if you were Victoria's Secret, you knew when you ran the fashion show on TV, you were going to have this huge spike in traffic, and you had to have the infrastructure available in place to meet your peak requirements, even if that occurred for only 15 minutes during the year.
Right. No, look, years ago, Metropolitan Opera was one of my customers, and they do their tickets go on sale in the summer, and they do 98% of their business in like a week.
Wow.
And so they need to have the capacity for ticketing for that day way beyond the rest of the year. So the rest of the year, they have that massive capacity sitting idle.
Right. So if you were somebody who's selling infrastructure, and all of a sudden a cloud computing provider comes along and says, you don't need to own that stuff. You can lease it as you need it and be entirely flexible. If you're IBM, what do? You can't say, I guess we're going to stop selling mainframes and we're going to lease capacity to our customers. Because the self-impact on your business is so strong, and we see this in the transition to software as a service. The Oracles and SAPs, who are in business models that are challenged, by the don't own software, and they're making these sometimes painful transitions to selling seats and overcapacity to meeting, on-demand requirements. And so, that to me is the essence of disruption. It's not only new capabilities, but new capabilities that challenge the investment in the status quo. If you're a New York City taxi medallion owner,
that's a popular one these days.
Yes, for those of you who don't know, New York City taxis, and this is a system going way back, were capacity constrained. You had to have a medallion, and those individual medallions sold for north of $1 million on the open market. Because if you wanted to operate a taxi, you needed a medallion, and it was strictly regulated and capacity constrained, and medallions went for $1 million. Along comes Uber and says, we can just give people a smartphone in the car and give them a better experience than the New York City taxi. And I'm not sure the exact numbers, but I think medallions are down over 50%.
Wow.
Yeah. I think they're selling for under $500,000 now. and that's probably an inflated price. We just in the last week or so, there was the city of New York, in a study that was certainly hugely desired by the taxi industry. New York did a study, was Uber contributing to urban traffic problems? And the study concluded, no, they weren't. Which, it's one of those ones, the people who funded the study went in with a bias, saying, it's causing a traffic problem. There were huge interests who were interested in that assertion, saying, it's creating a traffic problem. And the answer is, it's not. And, some of it comes from the fact that we'll talk about cars in a little bit, but car ownership is down. Yes, you've got more Uber drivers, but if one Uber driver is replacing what might have been 3 cars on the road, that's in fact a good trade-off.
Well, I remember my SATs, and it on-premise computing is to cloud as taxis are cars, ownership is to...
So what were your SATs?
What were my SATs? I did well in the math. Actually, I think it was pretty even. I think I got 13, 40, 50. I was... it was enough to get me into Queens College.
Of
course, all you needed was tuition to get into Queens College.
I brag, but if my daughter's watching, she was 10 points away from a perfect score, parent brag, in her sophomore year in high school. Pretty smart kid, so I won't brag about my score because she's chuckling at us.
But you can do the humble brag.
Where did she get it from?
Exactly.
Yes.
So disruptors. You talked about cloud, big data.
I think it's a fascinating time. I've been involved in the technology industry. It boggles my mind now, but for about 36 years, and it's a fascinating industry. Never a boring day. Never, ever, ever a boring day. But I think this is one of the most, the most interesting year for technology, by far, because there are a couple of things at work here.
I was going to say, you got to back that up.
Yeah. But there are a couple of things at work here.
Okay.
Number one, the industry is often kind of in these 10-year cycles. So it's not like there's a new disruptor every year. There are these 10-year cycles. And the last cycle that began I started talking about social, mobile, big data, and cloud in 2007. And so, we're into about the 8th, 9th year of that disruptive cycle. And what happens is, with a lot of these new disruptors, there's a phase. They first come in, and there's this early adoption phase. There are a whole bunch of things we do, because they're new and different. And then we hit a second phase where they become a little more mature, and we start to, it becomes, rather than a disruptor, it becomes part of the infrastructure. And having done so, there are things we ask like, okay, now that we've got these broadly deployed, what can we do that we couldn't do before that re-accelerates the innovation?
Right.
But at the same time that's happening, we get the next wave of disruptors, and they start to make their early entrance. And so things like Internet of Things and augmented reality and cognitive computing and wearables, which are in the early stage, and they start to come in and amplify and change and influence the last set of disruptors. And the thing that I think makes it even more exciting is it used to be with these 10-year cycles, it took a number of years for things to get broadly deployed. Now, because we've got this internet connectivity and high speed and stuff like that, there are a whole bunch of things that come into the market, and their time to critical mass is, I'm probably not overly exaggerating to say months. You can get to tens of millions and hundreds of millions of users in a matter of months.
Are you telling me that disruption is being disrupted? But the cycle.
But the nature of it, the pace and urgency and acceleration. Because it used to be, you had time to breathe, you had time to consider these things, and I've spent a fair amount of my time in the enterprise space. I always talk about the CIO's traditional reaction to new technology. And there was a three-phase reaction. Reaction number one was no, and that never worked.
Isn't it like denial?
Anger,
acceptance.
But the denial was no.
Right.
When that didn't work, they go, oh, security risk.
Right.
Which didn't work either. And then they, I used to have a sign on my my office door that said, which way did they go? How many of them were there? How fast were they moving? I must find them. I am their leader. And that kind of was
I had to think about that one.
You laugh last, think slowest.
Yeah, that's guilty as charged.
Yeah, but it was that kind of thing. Then they tried to run in front of the parade. And when technology adoption was somewhat slower, that kind of strategy worked. It sort of worked with PCs, because users ran into a wall. You did all this neat stuff on the PC, but you wanted all the corporate data. Oh, you want mainframe class capacity? You got to come to me. Right. Now you want mainframe class capacity, you go to Amazon, and you've got a scalable architecture that's more flexible than the enterprise, more immediately responsive. And the CIOs go, where did they go? Yeah. Why are my transaction volumes on my mainframe system down? It's because shadow IT, is now the main thing. So I think this pace of adoption is something that is not fully appreciated. I'm actually speaking next week in New York at a CIO conference put on by HMG Strategies, and I get to wave my Dr. Disruptive hat. And we had a prep call yesterday, and I was going through, and the moderator said, what do you tell a CIO? It's like, hurry up. Yeah. Some years ago, I was giving a presentation and talking about the pace of change and so on. And during the Q&A, the first person asked me a question, and I felt sorry throwing him under the bus. Not really, but he was probably about a week from retirement. Right. And he asked me, how will we know when we're going too fast? And I looked at him in all earnestness and said, trust me, that won't be your problem.
But the challenge is for the CIO, she's got to make a 5-year plan.
Yes.
So how do you make a 5-year plan when the technology you're going to be using in 5 years
doesn't exist
yet?
Yes.
Because that's new.
Yes.
It used to be, because look, the pace of hardware, the pace of software and technology was restricted by hardware. That I have to buy hardware and I make an investment in hardware and then put my software on it. But I don't have that anymore. Yeah. So I can do a rapid adoption and change. If I installed an ERP system 15 years ago, that was a multi-million-dollar investment before I even turned it on. Yeah. And today all the other processes there, but I can turn it on in a day.
Let me give you two answers, because you've asked a very provocative question.
Cool.
Answer number one is, obviously, you've just got to plan for much faster cycles. So there are a whole bunch of things. Your technology refresh is just going to be constant. There used to be things, we did migrations, we turned on the switch, it worked, and we said, thank God, and we went and collapsed for 4 months. Now it's a continuous cycle. So that's change number one. Right. More importantly, and I think the thing that's grossly underappreciated in this regard is, while we've changed the technology innovation cycle, we have not really fully addressed the ability of people to assimilate technological change. We are now the gating factor. You can deploy all the technology in the world, if your users still continue to send emails rather than using your collaborative systems, and they make decisions without having, looked at the available data sources and so on.
Let me just reiterate that I believe that you need to put your credit card in if you hit reply all. I'm just going to
yes.
I just want to put that out there.
Yes. I just chastised somebody yesterday for sending out an email to about 250 people without putting all those names on the BCC line. That's another. Yeah.
Right. But anyway, sorry,
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah. But the ability of people to assimilate technological change is.
But isn't that evolving as well? And now we get into a generational thing.
Well, yes and no. Yeah, yes, I think the younger generation has grown up with more technology change, so they internalize it better. But there are certain things that are just fundamentally human capabilities and approaches. There is a natural tendency. Inertia is a powerful force. Even among teenagers, and 20-somethings.
Right.
So you've done something. You're naturally going to be. One of my favorite lines for all time is, "When all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail."
Yep, I use that all the time.
Yes, and that's a natural human tendency. That whatever tool you've got is the appropriate one for the solution. There's comfort in that. There's value in that. I think we give kids too much credit for being able to multitask. There's a cost in that,
Right.
So if you're trying to the reason why people do so much in email today rather than using more efficient, better, collaborative kinds of platforms is there are only so many queues you're going to manage. How many tabs do you have open on your browser?
Right.
There was a time I single tasked in my browser. I had an email client, and that was about it.
Well, look, I talk about this all the time. The pace of adoption of a piece of software is relative to the amount of time and how much of your business, how much of your day you can spend in that piece of software,
right,
and be effective.
Yes.
And if it's an extra thing that by the way, I have to go check Slack. Then that's not going to happen. But if Slack is integral to how you're going to get your job done, it's more likely to get adopted, and it's open on your screen.
Yeah,
but it's one of those queues.
Yes.
But I can't have 20 of them.
Right, and that's one of people ask me, how do I manage to tweet so much? And I started tweeting in about 2007, and I've averaged about 8 tweets a day for every day since then, 30-something thousand tweets. And what I say is, for the most part, the time I'm doing tweeting is not incremental. I'm tweeting, I read something, it's easy to click the Twitter icon and share it with people.
Right.
I'm on conference calls, clients who I work with ignore this portion. I may not always be paying rapt attention, to your droning on in the conference call. And the times I go, can you repeat that question? I have problems with the phone line.
Somebody has to disrupt the conference call.
Yes, or stop it. Yeah, yes.
The conference call.
Yeah, we could do a whole session on, productivity time sinks. Yeah.
Right, but Twitter.
Yes, I've heard of them.
No, you're just saying, so that's why you're doing your.
Yeah. That it's a multitasking function. So I was able to add that into my daily existence,
right,
without, incremental time requirements, and get, thus was able to go through the learning curve, and that's still, 9 years hence, one of Twitter's biggest problems is take huge time to validate.
I'm going to throw a fresh desk plug in. What I'd love to hear, and I hear this from customers all the time, it's like, oh, I live in your software. It's the first thing I open in the morning, and it's and it's still on my desk, when I leave.
Yes.
And that's because it's become part of how you do that work.
Yes.
And that's great when it happens, but it's also then difficult to then change it, because that's how I do my business.
Yes.
So that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
And that's that comfort, that pace of human change.
And now, I asked you the question, the browser, the tabs I have open at anything, before I read anything, I have my personal email client, my Gmail account, and my personal calendar. I have a work email account and work calendar. I have Twitter, Facebook. I have a project management tab. I have, some money kinds of things, and those are all the things I have open before I, A, do any work, and B, think about adding something new into the mix.
Right.
And so even while we've got this rapid technological deployment, the challenge gets to be, what's the human adoption look like, and how do you make that time to value so quick and that time to critical mass? A collaborative platform, Slack. Collaborative platforms are pretty boring when you're the only person on it. Yeah.
No, but that's an excellent point. And if anybody's out there and you're a software entrepreneur and you've got a startup, that's the key, is that time to value.
Yes.
Because that 15 seconds, or it could be 5 minutes, or whatever that extra time that someone has to think about whether I'm getting value out of this, you lost.
Oh yeah, there are companies who've disappeared because they got all the news in the world. I mean, I'm thinking there have been a variety of things none of whom come to mind because they came onto the public consciousness. Everybody looked at it. What was the social network that was going to replace Facebook? Because they protected your privacy. And
is that Ella?
Yeah.
Ella.
There are a whole bunch of these things. It used to be.
And there was another one that was like more of an open source.
Yeah.
I can't remember that.
Yeah. But it used to be one of the competitive differentiators was time to utility. So could I learn the software without working at it? Was the interface so intuitive and those kinds of things? That's just table stakes now. You've got to do that. Even if you're the most complex enterprise software, people have to be able to use it out of the box, with no documentation, no training, and come up to speed. But it's now a matter of, and can you deliver the value? So it's not only do I know how to use it, I got something worthwhile out of it, so I'll leave the tab in the browser open. That to me is one of those litmus tests.
You're just doing my fresh desk marketing page. That's great. I love it.
Yeah. How much are you?
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about some of the other new disruptors. I mean, we social data, mobile, big data, cloud. That's there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the new stuff.
Well, augmented reality. I love that one.
You've talked about it before.
Yes, and there are a lot of people. virtual reality is what a lot of people are thinking about right now.
I was going to say, explain the difference between augmented and virtual.
Yes. But virtual reality is getting all the buzz now, especially since Oculus Rift announced that they're coming. They're taking pre-orders, $600 for the thing. My son has already added it to his birthday, Hanukkah, whatever wish list, because he saw the price and realized, it was probably a bit rich for his budget. So it's like, okay, how about your budget, Dad? But the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality in many ways is a closed environment. You put on a headset and
you are in it.
Cardboard, yes. It is a self-contained environment, 100% defined by the viewer, the software, whatever it is you're looking at. It has interesting implications, certainly huge impact on gaming, because you can have some incredible gaming experiences.
It's the ultimate immersive experience.
Not ultimate. I don't know if you've ever been down to downtown Disney, not the boardwalk area, but the downtown Disney area. They've got one of those things where you can design your own roller coaster. You sit there with software, define the roller coaster. You then get into one of these little things on how many ever degrees of motion, and you ride your roller coaster. So it's
right. So it's got the actual physical.
Yes.
It's not just the visual.
Yes.
And audio.
Yes. Right. And auditory. There's motion to it. So, but even without that, these things can be pretty wildly intense. But augmented reality, and this is one of my favorite ever. I can't remember who said it to give them the attribution, but augmented reality. And probably, pop your tabs of LSD before I complete the sentence here, because this is one of those like, whoa moments. Augmented reality is, imagine if reality was a read-write medium. Right now it's a read-only. You see something, and that is the reality. Augmented says, how can I use digital technology, to overlay what you're really seeing, So you now have a blended experience of that virtual reality, self-contained environment, and yet, overlay with reality. So, think about the next iteration of Google Glass.
Right.
Where I look at you.
So the entire world is a green screen.
Yes. I look at you and your Facebook, profile, your LinkedIn profile, and your Twitter feed is scrolling down. So even while we're talking, I know who you are. I know what, is on your mind right now. And there are just so many examples of this. Sports. We've had this for a long time. Those of you who watch a football game.
But an interesting perspective on that. So I'm driving in the car with my daughter the other day, and I was using Waze to get to where we wanted to go. I was using Waze to get to where I wanted to go. And she said, "What did you do before Waze? How did you get places?" And I said, "We had these things called maps."
Yeah.
But then she was smart enough to say, "The map tells you where you're going, but how do you know where you are right now?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yes, that actually was one of." You sit there with the map, trying to figure out, looking at landmarks, signs like where am I now? Because I can see where I need to go, but where am I now? Yeah. But we take for granted that this is not augmented reality, but it's close.
Yes.
Because it allows me to overlay where I am with and where I'm going.
Yeah, and where augmented reality takes that is, right now it's a heads down, heads up experience.
Right.
Augmented reality, think of it as, a fighter pilot.
My kids watch movies with their phone because they want to look up stuff on IMDb or Google or to find out what's going on. So that's adding more to the experience.
Yeah, or, I was down in Florida in December talking to this travel group, talking about the next wave of technology, and I said, my anecdotal survey shows that something on the order of, in New York City, no exaggeration, about 15 to 20% of people who are walking around the city are walking around like this. They are looking at their device at the same time they're walking around the city. And, one, it's kind of a problematic thing because, a big guy, there's probably about once a month when I cause somebody to drop their phone. Because if they think because they're looking at their phone that requires me to augment the laws of physics by immediately teleporting, 3 feet to the left so they don't collide with me, or jump against the building wall. No, I think they've got some responsibility.
You don't have cat-like reflexes?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, Ninja Doc. Yeah, no, I don't. Right. And even with cat-like reflexes, when you're, I can only move the mass so quickly. The laws of physics still apply to me. But I said, what we can either do is start to, say, okay, how do we augment that experience, or how do we blend the two experiences? So that the thing I'm looking at on my screen is not only a reflection of the screen, but instead of holding it like this, why aren't I holding it like that? So effectively, I'm seeing the world through my camera lens, and that camera lens shows me what's there, but also because of the display, now has the ability to overlay, you name it, kinds of information. So
instead of seeing the world through rose-colored glasses, you'll be seeing them through rose-colored augmented reality lenses.
Yes, this is one of those things.
You could change it and make it nice.
Oh yeah, it's a gray day outside. But when you say you can make it nice, we're saying this with cars. Cars in the fog at night, you don't see things. The car, Cadillac's been touting this, in their ads for years, where you can see that deer standing on the road, before your visual acuity notices it, and there are a whole bunch of things when it comes to entertainment, safety, information, more effective communications, a whole bunch of things where combining the physical and the digital, is going to just transform experiences, the way we work, the way we interact, the way we share information, the way we experience things. And it's one of those things, anytime we get into these conversations, you're sitting there thinking, wow, that's a long way off, isn't it, Jonathan? You're overstating the case. And I am guilty. I always overstate the case in the short term. But I'm equally guilty of understating the case in the medium term. This stuff, it's not only going to do all of that in the next 5 to 8 years, it's going to do it more comprehensively than I'm talking about even now. Because when we get those early experiences, we're going to learn, we're going to iterate it quickly, we're going to deploy it rapidly. I just, augmented reality, I think is an amazing thing that we're just now starting.
Related to augmented reality is a term you put here, which I think is great, which is situational awareness. I think that is actually, if you can sum up how to make the value out of that. It's not what I'm asking it to do, it's what it knows that I should want to do.
Yes, the whole notion of cognitive, I understood, and that should worry both of us, but cognitive computing more broadly, it's, how do I, of all the things you can present to me, how can you present the things that you should know because of where I am, what I'm doing, who's in proximity? There are a whole bunch of things. Again, at the Florida Travel Conference, they always want to give you better travel experiences. And I had fun with this one. I said, with all the information you've got about me, why is it that when I check into a hotel room, if there's some amenity they've given me, it's a fruit basket? Do I look like a fruit basket kind of guy? It's like, I'm a sports fan. You couldn't say, hey, the Mets are in town. Here's a package deal or something like that. You give me a fruit basket.
Look, you've said it very often on this show that you're willing to trade your information for value.
Right, and oh, by the way, if you don't think you're trading your information for value, your information is out there. Even if you think it's not, if you've got a smartphone on, turn it off now. Your information is out there. The stuff they know about us, on the one hand is, if you're inclined in that way, is shockingly scary. But yes, with all the information that's out there, right now, it's either going to be used to provide value to us and or to extract economic advantage against us. And that's one of the interesting tensions, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years. How much of it will be a big brother thing versus an empowering and enabling thing. I think that one is very much in the air, with Big Brother winning right now, but not necessarily preordained to win. Yeah, I mean, what's known about us is truly scary. I was just reading something where what's available on the dark web and so on, and that one of the most valuable things now, even more valuable than your credit card information, is Uber account information. Because the things they can learn from your Uber account, one, it's often tied to a financial transaction, but two, the things they can learn about movement patterns. I've seen it theorized that, well, more than theorized, that Uber is can predict when people are having affairs. And so there's probably a whole bunch of information that if you wanted to use it to blackmail people, and there are lots and lots of examples of that kind of thing, there may be nothing better than Uber. Advice to those of you who are trying to cheat: walk a block before you hail the Uber. And in random directions. And non-predictable random directions.
Right. So you talk about turning off your phone. There's this always listening technology.
Yes.
So it's not even just, we know that our locations are being tracked, because that's what our phone has. The cell companies have to know where we are, because that's how they're able to send stuff to our phone.
If you've got a Vizio TV, unplug it now, because there are a whole bunch of things we click,
Vizio
okay.
would probably not be a sponsor.
or maybe in a vain attempt to influence us. If we come back next month saying, Vizio is.
Well, they could try.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to let them try.
We didn't win the lottery last month.
No.
Yeah.
No, I think you posted something about that.
You didn't
driving
win
a
a
mile,
ticket.
was that the one? Maybe it wasn't you. Someone said that if you drove a mile to get your lottery ticket, you were more likely to die in a car accident than to win
the lottery.
the lottery.
Yes. But it was still a pretty good risk-reward equation. Yeah.
No, but you said the double.
Yes.
No, tell me, but you're not saying. Yeah, that was a good one.
Well, you didn't buy a ticket, correct?
I did not.
Yeah. The reason why, and you're there, it's like, you're not going to win. I said, look, New York's original motto, you got to be in it to win it. For $2, I increased my odds of winning infinitely. I went from 0 to 0.0, but it was still
An
infinite increase.
Right.
The next ticket merely doubled it.
Right.
Yeah. So doubling my odds was a bad investment.
Diminishing returns.
Yeah. Not diminishing returns. It's on an economic, award analysis, it's a bad investment. The first one's a justifiable investment. Right. Yeah.
All right. Back to always listening.
Always listening.
This is another trend for 2016.
Yes. And there are explicit products that do that. Amazon Echo. That we're just have things that will listen to what we're saying.
It's like Jarvis in Iron Man. It's just the computer that's always listening and waiting for you to tell them what to do.
Yes. And I would call that kind of the, active value-driven overt listening. And then there are the, I'm listening, you don't realize I'm listening, you have no idea what I'm doing with what I listen to, and it may be of value to you, but it may equally be, or greater of value to a marketer, who is wondering, what does somebody do, when my television commercial is on? Do they call up their friend and say, wow, I saw this most amazing commercial, or do I hear the sound of the toilet flushing? I guess they left the room. And these listening things,
footsteps or whatever.
And what gets done with that information, related to kind of another disruptive trend, Internet of Things, which is basically saying, the Internet's not going to just be connected to what started as our desktop computers, and then our laptops, and then our mobile phones, and now our watches and our activity bands and our eyeglasses. That there's going to be internet connectivity built into everything, and we can build interesting devices related to that. And don't think high tech, think Barbie. There's now a internet connected Barbie that your child can converse with Barbie. That information, what the child says to the doll, will be conveyed back to Mattel. Mattel will then, their computers will figure out, what to say back to the child. Problem number one, a lot of people, and this is one of the banes of this new software-defined world, that developers are really good at adding features to software. They're not so good at adding security to software. So all of these internet-connected things, your cars get hacked. There's an internet-connected gun that was shown to be pretty insecure, where somebody could remotely control the trigger and the aim of the gun.
Nice.
Really kind of scary.
Your cars,
They can shut off your car. And that's one of the more benign things they can do with the car. Or your Volkswagen, you can circumvent the regulations because of intelligent software. So there's connected stuff, but the Barbie thing, as a parent, on the one hand, wow, it's neat. My child can have a neat conversation, with their doll, and then somebody takes it over and starts going, and reach into mommy's wallet. I mean, new vectors for, criminal activity, new vectors to terrify your child. I mean, there are so many things out of this that on the one hand are really exciting, because I think it's neat having interactive capabilities and things that respond to me, insert, key lament about, kids' imaginations. I grew up without any, things that talk to me, or Matchbox cars that were autonomously driving or anything like that. I had to move them around, and it's amazing the world I could come.
Make up my own stories.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we talked about some of the things that we see for 2016. Let's talk about some things that are going to go away.
Yep. The top of the, all right.
So Steve Jobs was right?
Was right, yes.
Steve Jobs was right.
Yeah. And we're not talking about Google, we're not talking about Microsoft. Adobe Flash, the most bloated, routinely on our pet peeve list, because of the bloatware, crapware, defaultware, hijacking. Let's ignore for the fact that it was a terrible piece of software that was hugely unreliable, unstable, caused your computer to crash, took up resources, and so on.
But how do you really feel?
Yeah. Well, it was also a wonderful thing in its time. I don't want to.
No, when Flash animation first came out on browsers, that was spectacular.
Yes.
Because it took a flat text-based image thing to suddenly you had movement.
Yes.
And that was amazing.
Yes. But it's outlived its usefulness. It didn't evolve with the times. It wasn't a great piece of software. And, despite its cross-platform promise, there were all sorts of platform incompatibilities, and HTML5 has, put Flash to bed, Flash RIP.
So the next one on this list is bringing a little bit of interest to my eye.
Yeah, keyboard lovers, I'm sorry, but, BlackBerry has, this is one of those things you could say BlackBerry is dead, long live BlackBerry.
They had the world at their feet and they tripped.
Yes. They were the original smartphone. They had so many things.
Do you remember when BlackBerry Messenger was a thing?
Oh yeah.
And the kids had
BBM.
Yeah.
It had religious devotees. It had reliability. It had battery life. It had all sorts of things. And it had a walled garden.
A walled garden.
Yeah. Walled gardens, are really tough to sustain. Apple, it's done a pretty good job.
Here's my BlackBerry, I can get 5 apps in the App Store. Here's my iPhone, I can get 150,000 apps.
Yeah. And 5 apps, 4 of which you didn't want.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, other than Microsoft Office.
Yeah. And it was also one of those, the keyboard was great. And one of my, I can't say enough good things about it. And I feel sorry for, you iPhone people who still largely tap, because that's the default. But swipe, to me, is perhaps one of the most amazing pieces, not perhaps, is one of the 3 most amazing pieces of software I've worked with in my life. VisiCalc.
But I still know my Palm Pilot graffiti.
Yes, yeah.
That's not more efficient than swipe?
No, it's not. It's
worse. It's like you have to do 8 things just to get 1 letter.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think when I said, amazing pieces of software. Swipe, VisiCalc.
VisiCalc.
Trying to think what else, ranks up there.
The spreadsheet. I mean, the spreadsheet is one of the most amazing things to ever do.
And the browser too.
Browser.
If those of you who were around, in the internet before the browser, having to do telnet and all sorts of
links.
Weird things to access stuff that was on the internet. Having the browser with, there have been a few amazingly transformative. But, swipe is right up there, and it eliminated my need for a keyboard.
All right. Another mobile.
Microsoft's Windows Mobile, another one of those missed opportunities, and I give them a lot of credit in the early days.
Walk on my shelf with my Zoom.
Yeah, because I was an early Windows Mobile user, and Microsoft, if we say BlackBerry invented the smartphone, you might say Microsoft invented the software platform for the smartphone. But they, depending upon your perspective, made an essential, the only decision they could make as compared with Apple, but it was a decision that doomed them to failure. And the answer was they let the carriers ruin the experience. So the software platform was interesting. The user experience was gruesomely bad. And it enabled, in fact, compelled Apple, when they went to the carriers, go, I'm not going to let you do that. I know one of you is going to cave because I've got a really great platform here. One of you is going to cave. Who wants to win here? And AT&T.
AT&T, that's right. That's right.
And AT&T, they're now one of the two dominant carriers in the country. At the time, it was a much more fractured environment, and AT&T did not have a strong place, and they were able to capitalize on giving the kingdom to Apple.
All right, and the last one on your list here, none of us will be sad to see go.
Cable TV. Well, I'll be sad to see it go.
Yeah?
Yeah.
No, I agree, but I want to hear you talk about it.
Cable TV bundles. That for years, the notion of buying, video services a la carte.
Well, I think this is one of the cases where what you want is not what you want. Meaning,
be careful what you ask for.
Right. Yeah. Consumers want the ability. They say, I only want to pay for what I use.
Right.
But there's other stuff that you don't realize will be gone because of the fact that it's being covered by your.
Yes, there are a whole bunch. We lament the fact you got 200 channels, none of which are any good. Right. We may end up with only 30 channels, but we'll discover that those other 170 were things that we might not have watched a lot, but now that they're gone, we miss History Channel documentaries and
Sharky.
Yeah. Well, maybe not. Yeah. The reason why I say I'm not going to lament it, being a sports fan, I appreciate that a lot of you are subsidizing my watching of ESPN.
The most expensive channel on cable.
Yeah. Your cable bill, most of you, $25 to $30 of your cable bill is going to ESPN, even though over half of you would be happy to see it go away. So if half of you saw it go away, all of a sudden I might have to pay, my share of carriage to get ESPN, and my bill is going to go up because I will, pay for that. But that's something that is going to influence the economics of sports in huge ways in years to come, because there's been this massive rights fee explosion, fueled by the ESPN tax on cable, viewers. You take away the ESPN tax, and there's less money in the environment, and there are a whole bunch of things that are going to change when there's less money in the environment.
Yeah. All right, let's get to some of our monthly features. We've got, actually, we've got a whole bunch. Let's see, but we don't have that much time, so let's see if we go over these quickly. So let's, pet peeve.
I'm actually kind of a, happy person, generally this month. But, my pet peeve, I've got a few applications on my cell phone, tablet that change the UI for no apparent reason. It's like somewhere along the way.
You're not an Apple user, so all I have to do is say iTunes, and everybody in the entire Apple universe cringes because they change it, and they change it arbitrarily, and it's always worse than it was before.
Yes, and there's also, in the early days of the graphical user interface, there were a couple things I talked about. One was the intuitiveness of the interface, but equally importantly is, even if it's not intuitive, the consistency across application platforms.
Right. Notice that the G has been dropped, by the way. It's just UI.
Yes.
They don't call it graphic user interface.
Oh, okay,
They just
yes.
call it
User interface, yes, yeah.
So you're showing your age.
I'm damn
Guilty.
proud of
Guilty,
it,
right.
whippersnapper. Yeah, but they change these things, and when you've got a zero installed base, somebody will learn your interface and find its intuitiveness. At some point, changing the interface is a non-trivial interruption to the user experience. Forcing people to relearn things, and while it may be better, and I apologize to all of you UX people out there, but there are times where sustaining the experience that we've become familiar with trumps but this is a little better.
Or when they change the color of the icon.
Yeah.
Then I can't find it on my phone.
Yeah, it's amazing how we internalize these kinds
All right,
of things.
and you have a travel thing here.
My kudo my travel thing. Flying to London. My flight was delayed for an hour and a half. The pilot made a single announcement going, basically, we're having a problem and I'll get back to you when I know something. I got a variety of travel aids, and I'm getting all of these notifications, that are pushing back the departure time, giving me updates, none of which the cockpit is sharing with the passengers. So it's kind of the, fertilizer, keep them in the dark and poop on them kind of experience, where with information, it's like, we know this stuff.
Right, and that's managing expectations, and that's a failure. So many businesses fail to manage expectations.
Yeah, but not only manage expectations, it's again a big data and information kind of thing. One of the things from a very young kid, I loved listening to air traffic control. I have an app. I listen to air traffic control while I'm at an airport. I know what my inbound flight is doing. The board is showing, it's going to arrive on time. It's like, no, my flight scanner app, I can watch it, it's now still somewhere over the middle Atlantic. There are things that don't make it down the information chain. And when you've got an increasing user population that knows more about what's going on than the service provider, there are some really, bad consequences for that service provider, and so just pet peeve is when I know more than the provider knows, right. And they should know better and have an ability to institutionalize the information.
Or when you know more than they're willing to share with you.
Yes, or when I know they're lying. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And there have been large instances of that. I know they're lying. I remember years ago, not lamented, gone US Air is telling me, a flight to Richmond was canceled because of weather. It's like it's 70 degrees and sunny in Richmond. Every other airline is running their flights on time into the airport. Come on, give me another excuse. It's not weather. Yeah.
All right, you got to do your kudo because I'm pretty happy about that one too.
Yeah, Verizon, as I mentioned that, and it's weird. This could be the first time I've ever given a kudo to a telecommunications company. And I'll figure out a way to turn it into a pet peeve too. But the kudo is, I traveled over to the UK, and there have probably been pet peeves before where we've talked about the cost of data roaming. And for several years, I kept a T-Mobile phone.
You get 100 meg, and you're sitting there watching it, saying, "How close am I? How close am I?" Because it cost me another $25.
Yeah,
for another 100 meg, right?
So I landed at Heathrow, turned on my phone. It texted me saying, "Welcome to Heathrow. For $10 a day, you can basically extend your home data plan while you're in Europe." So no worrying about data overages, just it's $10 a day. And you do the quick math in your head, it's like, ooh, well.
$30, I'm here for 3 days.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, kind of risk reward, maybe if I effectively managed my data, I could do it for $17. Or I could be one of those nightmare people who ran up a $700 data charge.
Or just not worry about it.
Yeah, and it's like, I turn on the phone, the text message comes up, it says, type yes to accept this. I typed yes, and $10 a day, no concerns about data overage, seamlessly roaming. And it was both a great elimination of a risk cost kind of thing, and a really nice user experience. Just, it recognized I was there. It said, here's what we can offer you. Type yes, and the service.
What we were talking about today.
Yeah.
No, excellent.
Nicely done.
We have a quote of the month.
Yes. It was Martin Luther King Day, last week.
My birthday.
Oh, yes. Happy birthday, youngster. But Martin Luther King, little known technology savant, in his 1964 Nobel Prize acceptance speech said, yet in spite of these spectacular strides in science and technology, and still unlimited ones to come, something basic is missing. There's a sort of poverty of the spirit which stands in glaring contrast to our scientific and technological abundance. The richer we have become materially, the poorer we have become morally and spiritually. We've learned to fly the air like birds and swim the sea like fish, but we've not learned the simple art of living together as brothers. 1964, 52 years later, the words are still poignant.
Absolutely. I can't add to that. So all I'm going to say is thank you all for joining us today on Pardon My Disruption. Our next show will be February 12th. We'll be again here in Stamford, Connecticut. And
assuming we survive the snow.
Assuming we survive snowpocalypse. Mind your disruptions. And we'll see you soon.